During the darkest moments of World War II, as German cities were reduced to rubble and enemy armies advanced on all sides, Adolf Hitler placed his hopes in something he believed could change the course of the war. A secret weapon. A creation so powerful that, according to Nazi propaganda, it would be capable of reversing defeats, destroying entire armies, and forcing the Allies to accept defeat. But what few knew was that, behind the grandiose promises, a very different reality existed. A story marked by despair, illusions, and decisions that would ultimately accelerate the collapse of the Third Reich. As the war progressed, Germany's situation became increasingly critical. In the east, the Red Army pushed back German troops, recovering lost territory and dangerously approaching Berlin. In the west, British, American, and Canadian forces advanced after the Normandy landings. For the first time since the beginning of the conflict, Germany was fighting on multiple fronts without sufficient resources to sustain the war. Factories were being bombed daily. Supply lines were compromised. Fuel was becoming scarce. And thousands of experienced soldiers had already been lost. Faced with this scenario, Hitler came to believe that only an extraordinary technological innovation could save his regime. It was in this context that one of the most ambitious projects of the war emerged. A weapon known as the V3. Unlike the famous V1 and V2 rockets, the V3 was something completely different. German engineers envisioned a gigantic cannon capable of firing projectiles at impressive distances. The idea seemed straight out of a science fiction novel. The plan consisted of building a weapon so powerful that it could reach enemy cities hundreds of kilometers away. The main target would be London. The British capital had already suffered devastating air raids, but Hitler wanted something even more terrifying. A weapon capable of bombarding the city continuously, day after day, without the need for airplanes. The project seemed promising on paper. But there was a problem. Turning theory into reality. The engineers created an unusual system. Along the enormous barrel of the cannon, small explosive charges would be detonated in sequence. Each explosion would gradually increase the projectile's speed. The expected result was an acceleration far superior to that obtained by conventional weapons. If it worked, it would be a military revolution. The Nazi leadership was fascinated. Valuable resources began to be directed towards the construction of the weapon. At a time when Germany was facing shortages of fuel, ammunition, and manpower, millions were invested in a project that promised miracles. Meanwhile, the Allies observed strange movements in northern France. British intelligence detected unusual constructions hidden among hills and fortified areas. Aerial photographs revealed tunnels, underground structures, and gigantic works. Something was being prepared. But nobody knew exactly what. The uncertainty generated concern. What were the Germans building? A new rocket base? An unknown weapon? Or something even more dangerous? The investigations continued. As new images were analyzed, experts realized that those structures could be related to a long-range artillery project. This was enough to trigger the highest alert. The Allies decided to act before it was too late. Bombers were repeatedly sent to attack the facilities. Tons of explosives fell on the complexes under construction. Each attack delayed the German schedule. Each explosion destroyed months of work. Even so, Hitler insisted. He believed that the weapon could still change the course of the war. While resources were consumed by the project, the military situation worsened. Soviet troops advanced. The Allies conquered new territories. Losses increased daily. But the Nazi leadership remained clinging to the hope of a miraculous solution. Finally, after years of development, the time for testing arrived. It was time to prove that the V3 could fulfill its promises. The results were disappointing. Mechanical problems constantly arose. Accuracy was far below expectations. The structures suffered damage during firing. The projectiles did not achieve the performance imagined by the designers. What should have been a revolutionary weapon began to reveal its limitations. Even so, some reduced versions were used. The firings occurred against Allied targets. But the military impact was practically insignificant. Nothing like the decisive weapon promised by the propaganda. No city was destroyed. No battle was won thanks to the project. No strategic breakthrough was achieved. Meanwhile, Allied bombing continued. Installations were destroyed one after another. Production became increasingly difficult. Germany no longer had the time or resources to correct the numerous problems. The dream of the superweapon began to fade. By early 1945, the reality was impossible to ignore. The Third Reich was crumbling. Berlin was surrounded. German forces were retreating in all directions. The so-called miracle weapons that were supposed to save Germany failed to deliver on their promises. Among them was the V3, a creation that consumed precious resources, mobilized engineers, required enormous construction efforts, and fueled gigantic expectations, but which never managed to alter the course of the war. Today, many historians see the project as a symbol of the final stage of the Nazi regime, a period in which decisions were made not based on the reality of the battlefield, but on the desperate hope of an impossible solution. The V3 represented exactly that. The belief that a single weapon could compensate for defeats, resource shortages, and strategic errors accumulated over years. But wars are rarely won by technological miracles. And, at that moment, no invention was capable of changing the fate that was already approaching. When the last battles ended and the war came to a close, the gigantic cannon that was supposed to terrorize London became just another relic of a failed project. A weapon created to change history, but which ended up being remembered precisely for never managing to do so. Before we conclude, pause for a moment and imagine this scene. Thousands of men fighting on different fronts. Entire cities in flames. Resources dwindling daily. And, while everything crumbled around them, leaders and engineers placed their last hopes in a single creation they believed could change the course of the war. But history has shown something that remains true to this day: no weapon, however advanced, can replace strategy, logistics, and the reality of events. The V3 was presented as a weapon capable of changing the world. However, it ended up becoming just another chapter in one of the greatest defeats in military history. And perhaps that's exactly what makes this story so fascinating. Because it's not just about technology or war. It's about ambition, about hope, about despair, and about how decisions made in the most critical moments can define the fate of entire nations. But now I want to hear from you. If you were living back then and had access to all the information we know today, would you believe that a secret weapon could actually change the outcome of World War II? Or do you believe that, at that stage of the conflict, Germany's defeat was already inevitable? Write your opinion in the comments. I enjoy reading different points of view, and often the best discussions arise precisely from your opinions. And if you've made it this far in the video, write the phrase in the comments. History beyond the battles. That way I'll know who actually watched until the end. If you enjoy little-known stories from World War II, secret projects, impossible missions, espionage operations, experimental weapons, and events that rarely appear in history books, subscribe to the channel now. Every week we bring new accounts that reveal the behind-the-scenes of humanity's greatest conflicts, with real stories, surprising details, and facts that many have never heard of. Also, don't forget to leave your like. It may seem like something simple, but this helps the video reach more people passionate about history, allowing the channel to continue bringing increasingly comprehensive content. Thank you for following this story to the end. And remember, behind every battle there is a decision. Behind every decision there is a story. And some of these stories continue to echo decades after the last shot was fired. See you in the next video. Until then.